I'm Hannah. I'm the Web Ops Coordinator at SCOTTeVEST, and I do a lot of public relations too. And this is my employer, Scott Jordan. Today's a very big, very busy day for us at SCOTTeVEST. Scott is appearing on ABC's hit reality show Shark Tank tonight. This has been a really long process from applying to be on the show to the actual filming to hearing if Scott was going to be in an episode that actually aired, and the day is finally here. So Scott, in a few words, how are you feeling?
I'm really excited and I'm really nervous all at the same time. I've never ever before spent so much time preparing for something, and I'm not really good at keeping my mouth shut. So you can only imagine how difficult it was. Having traveled away in September to LA and keeping my mouth shut for many months, and I'm excited. I think based upon the clips I've seen from the edits, the teasers, I have an idea how it's going to be portrayed. Obviously they have an hour's worth of content to edit down to 6 minutes, so it's up to them to decide how they're going to want to portray me.
So what are you most nervous about in terms of the editing?
I'm most nervous that they're going to have me portrayed as kind of an arrogant guy versus a guy who's passionate about his product and his brand. And I'm also nervous that people won't be able to figure out, in all honesty, that that technology-enabled clothing is related to SCOTTeVEST.
Because you weren't allowed to talk about
I was not allowed to mention the word SCOTTeVEST. If I did, it would have exposed that business to an equity interest to the producers, which otherwise I'm not allowed to mention the exact amounts, but it's public knowledge that but not widespread knowledge that when you go on the show, you actually give a percent of your business for the privilege of being on the show, whether or not you get an investment.
So something that Laura, Scott's wife, said yesterday that I thought was interesting. She said, "Arrogant is fine with me. I just don't want you to seem mean." So that sounds like that's kind of Laura's worst case scenario in terms of the editing. What's your worst case scenario?
I think that's the same. I think that I think that's the same. And the most I was concerned about being arrogant or mean was at the end when I pointed at the sharks saying they're out. I wanted that to come off. I thought about it, obviously. That didn't just come off the cuff. I knew at some opportunity I would have an offer or two, and I wanted to make an impactful reaction to the offer if I wasn't going to accept it. Something that has never before been done on the show, to my knowledge, that an entrepreneur pointing at a shark and telling them they're out. So I was really worried that when you do that, if you either look like a dork and they laugh at you, or you look credible. And having seen the clips, it looks credible. So, and I'm worried about in the edit that they're gonna cut out some of the parts that dealt with the description of the product and how cool the product was. And there was a lot of discussion about the patent and the enforceability, or and whether it's fair to enforce your own patent. Cuban and I got pretty heated. He thought it was ridiculous that I would get a patent and dare to enforce it, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you watch the show, the first thing they ask of every contestant is, what's proprietary? Is it patented? And most of them are except if it's patent pending, they're happy. They're glad with a patent pending. In my case, not only is it patented, but there's a reissued patent that makes it even stronger, and I've enforced the patent. And enforcing a patent is very costly to do. So it was a frustrating, heated exchange with Mark, and I just hope that people see the benefits of the product line and the benefits of licensing the technology, because that is our goal.
So you mentioned that you did eventually point at the sharks. You told them they were out. But going in, were you ready to make a deal?
Absolutely. I mean, for those people who know me well, I'm extraordinarily transparent, and I do not know how to tell a lie. You would see it on my face. So if I walked in there and I knew that I did not want to make a deal, that I was just there for the publicity, it would have been apparent to me And it would have been apparent to the Sharks, and it would have been apparent to ABC, and I think apparent to the viewing audience, and it would have been a credible presentation. I went in prepared to make a deal, but to make a deal on my terms.
Right.
I've watched that show enough and seen entrepreneurs bullied into the worst deals possible. Because I had a viable business that I believed in, that I didn't desperately need the money. I was going to make the deal that was offered or one better. I actually had anticipated that the Sharks would understand the benefit of what I had to offer, think it was a low valuation as I do, and get into a bidding war.
Yeah.
And that's quite possible. And I expect that to happen, honestly, as a result of the show now and the exposure that we're going to get.
So there is a lot of buzz leading up to the episode, and a lot of that is surrounding the whole, is this a PR stunt issue? But basically what you've said is you went in ready to make a deal, you know, and after you made that pitch, you know, what happened, and you were kind of thrown in there. Was that your favorite part, or, you know, what parts did you enjoy and what parts did you not enjoy?
I hated the pitch.
Yeah.
I was so scared to do the pitch. I am much better. I could have probably done a better demonstration of my jacket if you had turned to me when I woke up first thing in the morning, handed me a jacket and say, talk about it for 3 minutes.
It's true. You give Scott a script and all of a sudden he's like...
Freeze. I mean, it was just...
It's like an elementary school play.
It is absolutely that. I practiced hard for that. I mean, the morning of, I was recording myself on YouTube, private YouTube videos, and we have all these, and sending them to Liz and Tom and asking for their opinion, because I was really concerned. As I said, I'm very transparent. I'm not a pitch man, you know, in that scripted fashion. So I am still concerned that my pitch, you know, it comes off very canned and very hokey and very scripted. And it didn't help that when I was doing it, not only did I have a broken elbow that I had broke 2 days before and had to take my jacket off and do a lot of movement, and I had no cast. I had a sling, but I took the sling off. It didn't help that in the midst of my pitch, they had television problems, and they had to redo the whole screen. So they stopped me in the middle and said, "We start again." And I just nailed that. I mean, so...
I just have to interject with an anecdote. Scott sent me a Siri message a couple weeks ago that said, should we mention I had a broken oboe and was trying to hit it the entire performance?
Siri is, yeah, not all that good.
So we've talked a lot about the business side, how you went in mentally, you know, the deal that did or did not go down. We'll all know by the time this airs. But I understand that you have to meet with a psychiatrist when you exit filming. Did you crumble into someone's professionally sympathetic arms backstage, or what happened?
Well, you know, there's a few things. Right before you go into the tank, there's like all these TV people. It's like you're waiting and waiting and waiting for hours. You don't know when they're going to call you, and you just figured that at 1 o'clock, it'll be your turn. You can look at the clock and you can prepare. And I thought I was going to go in at about 8 o'clock or so. In the morning, first thing, so I could catch my flight that I had prearranged, and I know I'm not answering your direct question, but in a roundabout way.
We're talking about the emotional environment, kind of.
It is, and then all of a sudden, just like they turned to me and said, "You're on next," and I was, whoa, and then they put me in this little holding cell, which was like a room, this massive studio with a ceiling that you could bungee cord off of. And they put me in this holding area where there was another guy right next to that we could talk to each other in whispers and whatnot. And then they put me then they grabbed me right from there to the table where all my stuff was. And Liz had spent hours laying it out in just such a fashion, and it was just like thrown on the table, and I absolutely flipped out. I mean, literally. I mean, you know, they had promised, oh, we have professionals, and we'll. I said, I'm about to go up there, and there's no organization and stuff. So within moments, they did fix it all up, and then I'm standing, ready to walk down that hallway, and this guy, this cameraman, just walks by, and he says to me, I've never seen this guy. I've been interacting with a lot of different people. He says to me, "What did you have for breakfast today?" I was like, well, why are you asking that? He says, just answer the question. And I thought, you know, I'm like shaken up, and it was hard for me to remember what I had for breakfast. And then it just occurred to me right then that the reason why he was asking me is to know if I had my wits about me to answer a simple question enough before I walked into that room.
So the camera guy was your little first kind of psychological encounter.
Yeah, and then the second was they make you, and I remembered, and then it was almost a relief having to, not only to remember what I had for breakfast, but then to figure out why he was asking it. And it's like, okay, I got my wits about me, okay. And then you walk down the hall, and you stand there for like, I think it's 2 or 3 minutes. It felt like an eternity looking at all the sharks, and then looking at you. You cannot say a word. They don't say a word. They're just trying to get you in a moment that they can have you looking nervous, sweating, or whatever. And that psychologically, that was really hard. So to answer your question, after it was all said and done, and I was just thrilled to get on the plane and catch it and call all my friends up, not all my friends, but the people that put me there that were subject to confidentiality, and just give them not the outcome but tell them how I did. They said, no, you know, part of the process is you have to meet with the studio psychiatrist. I said, well, that's ridiculous. Why do I'm fine. I nailed it. I'm feeling really good about my performance, and I really felt awesome. I could tell by the energy in the room that everyone I talked to that they had never seen, you know, someone control the room to that degree. So they said, well, you know, it's just part of standard practice. And then I turned to my guy, my handler, and I said, can I fuck with her a little bit? Can I like say I'm flipping out? And he's like, she's a really nice woman. Don't do that. So she's
a really nice woman.
So I sit down with her, and I forgot her name, and she was really nice. And she starts out by saying, the canned speech, I want you to know I don't represent you. I represent the studio. And I'm here to just, you know, see how you're doing and check in. And I also want you to know that, as you know, we tape more than we air, and there's a likelihood that yours won't even air at all. And I looked at her, and I smiled, and I said, were you in that room when I gave my performance? And I used the word performance. And this is where I could understand maybe people thinking whether it was a publicity stunt. It was not a stunt, but it was a performance. And I'd be stupid not to go in there and understand that I have one chance before 6 million people to perform. And she says, of course, she looks at me, of course I was in there. I can't evaluate you here if I wasn't in there then. And I said, well, then what are the chances that's not going to air? And I was just as coy as I could have been, and she smiles and said, I get fired if you repeat this, and here I am repeating this on tape. And she says, but it would take a presidential announcement of war to preempt that. You nailed it. And at that point, I felt really good about that. So
she did an okay job.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that if you lost your job. It was not my intention.
I guess I would just wrap up by saying it's obviously huge in terms of your business. I'm sure, I mean, well, I know because I'm at SCOTTeVEST, it's been a huge lead up and we're expecting big things afterwards, but can you just say a little bit about what it means personally? I know you've been on camera before, you used to have Scott TV and you make tons of videos for SCOTTeVEST, but you know, what does a stage this big?
That's a great question. I don't know how it's going to change me. I mean, people who know me well, really well, know that I'm kind of oblivious to outside influences. So people who don't know me well think, you know, the media has to affect me. You know, the media attention. I've had a number of things written about me. I've been in a number of TV shows and whatnot, and on each and every one, it's not. It doesn't impact me. All I care about is the end goal of exposing the brand, getting more business. I don't feel that it's changed who I am. I'm a little nervous this time because you know, I've seen what exposure does to people in Hollywood and what it naturally does to people. I know this is just an offbeat reality show, or not so offbeat, but it's just 12 minutes of fame, and you know, for a lot of people, it starts and ends there, if they're lucky. Our goal from the get-go was to use these 12 minutes to launch a future, to take a brand that most people don't know about and expose them to it. I think it's not gonna change me. We live in Sun Valley, Idaho. I mean, it's 5,000 people in the community. Most people know everyone here to one degree or another, so but I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'm excited about the future. Did that answer?
Yeah, no, great. What are you afraid won't make the final cut?
That's a great question. What am I afraid won't make the final? There were some really funny things that happened in the room that I am certain the editors won't include.
Really?
Yeah. For example, you know, when I asked, you know, when I was presented with my couple offers, and I said, you know, listen, I want to ask a friend, you know, my advisor, you know, what to do for advice, which happens infrequently on the show, but it does happen. A lot of people call it husband and wife. And I said, they said, who is it? And I said, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. And they were all pretty impressed. And immediately, Mark Cuban says, I know Steve. Tell Steve I said hi. I said, I'll do that. And then right after that, Kevin, Mr. Wonderful, says, I know Steve too. Like he had to say, it was entertaining, and just the way in which he said it, I kind of wondered whether he really knew Steve. And so when I talked to Steve, I asked, you know, a very brief conversation with Steve because I didn't want it to go on and on. I got one great soundbite, and then I went right back in the room. It took like 10 minutes to get Steve on the line, though, and all that while the Sharks were like arguing about me. They were talking about me. Not so far away in earshot.
It's got to be a little distracting.
It was. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to have a private conversation when you guys can hear me? But they were busy talking about me in the pitch. So I asked Steve something. I went back in, and Mark said, so what did Steve say? I turned to Mark and I said, Steve says, hi, he knows you. And, you know, he says hi. And then I turned to Kevin and I said, Kevin, Steve says he didn't know you. And it was like this completely like embarrassing moment, and it was off the cuff, and as a result I went back and said, I'm just kidding. As it turned out, you know, because I didn't want Kevin to feel like I just made a fool of him in front of 6 million people. And later when I talked to Steve, I said, do you know Kevin? No, I don't know that dude. So I guess I'm concerned that kind of exchange, if you could have seen the looks on all their faces. And another thing, Mark and I talked about the patent quite a bit, and he thought it was atrocious that I would dare to enforce my patent. You know, that's what's wrong with American businesses, people suing over stupid things. I'm like, no, that's what's right with America. America was formed on the protection of intellectual property, and he of all people should know this, being in the entertainment business. And he actually used as an example, after I think after I talked to Steve Wozniak, maybe before, he said, you know how many patents Apple had up until just recently? And I said, no. He said, one. You know, just one patent, and I thought, as if to say, you don't need a lot of patents to succeed. Well, you know, at that point, I wish I would have had the wherewithal to say, well, I'm about to call Steve Wozniak. I didn't want to, you know, do things out of line, but I hope that they have that exchange so that the audience can see. Apple had one patent, but you know what? They needed that one patent to get market share and to protect their ideas. You could imagine if Windows had patented, you know, the Windows operating interface, or whoever came up with that, how valuable that would have been. So I take real issue with Mark on that point, and I hope intellectually that people can appreciate, you know, that exchange and what that meant. The last thing, and this I am certain they're going to edit out in its entirety, is after it was all said and done, after I pointed at both Sharks, they were stunned actually that had occurred, and Mr. Wonderful Kevin says, well, usually the way this works, let me turn it.
We got a little Apple situation.
Yeah. He says, usually the way this works is that there's negotiation, and not just I'm out. He says, you know, don't you want to negotiate? And I couldn't, because had I negotiated, you know, for SCOTTeVEST, I exposed SCOTTeVEST to the producers, and having not even mentioned the name SCOTTeVEST, I didn't want to, you know, to do that. So I want to stop here for a moment. Tyler, we have to make sure this does not, you know, air without my approval. I have to be really careful about a lot of these statements. He said, don't you want to negotiate? I said, no. And he said, well, that's it. We all kind of stood there like it's over. And it was like anticlimactic. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to shake everyone's hands. I mean, that's what you do. So I go to shake Mark Cuban's hands, and he smiles because they knew that they hadn't been played, but they knew it was executed amazingly well. It was the sense in the room. Everyone knew it. So much so that after I shook Mark Cuban's hand, I shook Damon's hand, and Damon looks at me in the eye and says, you are brilliant. This is why I don't hire people smarter than I am. Which honestly caught me a little by surprise because, frankly, I want to hire people smarter than me, yourself included. And then I went to Mr. Wonderful, shook his hand. I don't know if I hugged Barbara or shook her hand. I shook Barbara's hand. And then I went to the last guy, Robert, who I've always seen on the show as the nicest guy in the bunch.
I adore him.
He's a pussycat. He was the one who tried on the jacket. I'm worried that might not be in the edit because we had a great exchange where he tried it on, put stuff in, and said, this is great. And I went to shake his hand. He says, I'm not shaking your hand. You pointed at me like I was 12 years old. He literally said that. And I was like, did he just say that? That was, I shook 4 people's hands and I turned to him and I looked him in the eye and I said, I've been in business now 20 some years and I've never once had someone refuse to shake my hand. And with that, I turned around and I said, I am out of here. Turned my back on him. And he then said what they used in the clip, get out of here, which just appeared so pathetic. Having a guy who's walking out the door to tell him to get out of here, it just appeared. So I would like that to be in the edit. I think it's clear that it won't. And that would be great if that was in the edit.
Yeah. Well, one final thing in your red carpet moment. Tell us what you're wearing.
I never thought you would ask. This is the new Transformer jacket, and we're really excited about this. And this is all part of the technology-enabled clothing model. It's not just about wires and clothing. It's about designing pockets and ways in which to utilize different fabrications in clothing in a fashion that no one has done before, and license it under the brand name Technology-Enabled Clothing. Glad you asked about this new jacket. At SCOTTeVEST and Technology-Enabled Clothing, it's not just about a patent for wires and clothing. It's about a whole design philosophy, looking at clothing in a completely different way and trying to make it more functional yet equally fashionable. So this is the Transformer jacket. It has all the pockets and features and gizmos that you would expect from a SCOTTeVEST, including the iPad pocket, clear touch, and the like. But we went one step further. We made it into a Transformer jacket, which means it transforms from a vest to a jacket and a jacket to a vest merely by pulling off the sleeves.
No more gadget dance when you leave. Take your iPhone, iPad, even your keys.